Today, we are opening up one of the most remarkable and paradoxical chapters in American athletic history. It's a story where professional opportunity for women just exploded onto the national stage, only to be constantly checked by these really rigid social constraints. We are exploring the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League, the AAGPBL.
It's such a foundational piece of American sports history, running its course from 1943 to 1954.
A 12-year run.
Exactly. And the AGPBL is, well, it's unambiguously the forerunner of women's professional league sports in the United States. It provided a living wage and an elite competitive environment to over 600 women athletes during that time.
And it was big. I mean, it fielded up to 10 teams operating all across the American Midwest.
That's right. And what immediately strikes you as you look at the records from this league is the scale. This
Wow.
was not some minor sideshow.
No, not at all. Our research shows that this league hit a spectacular peak in public interest. By 1948, the annual league attendance across all teams soared to over 900,000 paid spectators.
That number is so critical. It proves the sheer appetite for high-quality professional sports entertainment was absolutely there.
Even for a brand new women's league.
Even for a women's league, during a highly turbulent period in American life, it wasn't just a novelty, it was a major attraction.
Now, of course, for virtually everyone listening, the AGPBL is immediately recognizable through the 1992 film A League of Their Own.
And the later TV series adaptations, sure.
Right, those are the touchstones for modern audiences. But we have to set the stage by acknowledging that, as compelling as those stories are, our sources confirm they are largely fictionalized accounts.
That's a really important distinction to make right at the outset. They borrow the framework and the era, but the specific characters, many of the events, they're invented. However, the connection to the real pioneering women is profound, and that was beautifully acknowledged during the film's production.
You're referring to that powerful moment when 65 original AGPBL members appeared in the movie, right?
Yes. They were included specifically for the scene, recreating the league's 1988 induction into the Baseball Hall of Fame. That appearance was the crucial bridge, allowing the pioneering women themselves to step into the fictionalized version, lending it immediate authenticity and recognizing their often forgotten history.
Absolutely. Those women, through their athletic skill, their dedication, and their personal sacrifices, they built something truly significant. It was a professional blueprint that future generations would benefit from. Our mission today is to move past the myths of Hollywood and explore the rigorous, challenging environment. We need to look at both the intense athletic demands and the, frankly, crushing social limitations that these pioneering athletes had to navigate every single day. This history is more complex than a simple feel-good movie. Okay, let's unpack this.
To truly grasp the motivation behind the AGPBL's founding, we have to recognize the severe existential crisis facing organized men's baseball in the early 1940s.
The U.S. had just entered World War II.
Right. And Major League Baseball executives were in a state of high alarm.
Who were the key figures involved in this, and what were they so worried about?
The primary figures included Philip K. Wrigley, the powerful chewing gum mogul, who would ultimately fund and found the league.
Of Wrigley Field fame.
The very same. Also Branch Rickey, a legendary baseball executive, and Paul V. Harper. Their fear was stark. Men's baseball might have to temporarily shut down operations entirely for the duration of the conflict.
Shut down? That seems extreme for a national pastime. Why was the threat so profound?
Two major factors, both stemming directly from the war effort. First was the massive loss of talent. Hundreds of players, from the minors right up through the major leagues, were enlisting or being drafted and deployed overseas.
Which would strip the teams of the very talent pool you need to maintain a professional, high-quality league.
Precisely. And without the talent, the product quickly degrades, which drives down interest.
Okay, that makes sense.
But the second factor was perhaps more debilitating operationally. Severe wartime restrictions on travel. Specifically, the government implemented aggressive gasoline rationing across the country.
So running a national league that required constant long-distance bus and train travel for multiple teams became, what, just logistically impossible?
Logistically and financially impractical for an extended season. Yes.
So their core concern was institutional preservation. They realized if they didn't offer some form of professional baseball, the public might forget about the sport entirely by the time the war ended.
That's the key takeaway. The solution they developed, founding a new professional league using women players, was a tactical, business-oriented decision. The goal was singular: maintain baseball in the public eye until the men returned.
ensuring that the infrastructure and audience for America's pastime remained intact post-war.
Exactly. So the motivation was institutional necessity and shrewd marketing continuity, rather than an enlightened view on gender equality in sports.
It was Wrigley, with his marketing empire, who spearheaded this. But while the AGPBL was groundbreaking as a professional venture, our research confirms women were playing organized ball long before 1943.
Absolutely. The lineage of women's baseball goes back nearly 80 years before the AAGPBL started. We know the first documented women's baseball team played at Vassar College in New York back in 1866.
1866, wow.
And throughout the late 19th and early 20th centuries, you also had those famous barnstorming groups known as the Bloomer Girls teams.
And the Bloomer Girls were interesting because they often defied expectations, right?
They did. They were semi-pro or amateur teams that toured, sometimes playing against men's teams, and often included one or two male players strategically placed among the women.
Part athlete, part entertainer.
Exactly. But they certainly kept the idea of women playing baseball visible. The AGPBL, however, elevated this into a fully structured, multi-team professional league.
And the recruitment process for this new league needed to be robust, focused on finding the highest caliber athletes available, primarily by scouting amateur fast-pitch softball games across the country.
The initial sweep was vast. Over 200 women were invited to initial tryouts at Wrigley Field in Chicago.
What an incredible stage for the beginning of this league.
It was. And after rigorous testing and evaluation, only about 60 were selected for the initial league roster across the first 4 teams. This selection process immediately brought to the forefront the dual standard that would define the league's entire existence.
The combination of skill and marketability performance plus presentation.
Exactly. Players were chosen for their demonstrated athletic skill. Their arm strength, speed, and batting ability had to be exceptional, but talent alone wasn't enough. They also had to conform rigidly to what the management and marketers deemed a wholesome feminine ideal.
So if you were a phenomenal player but didn't look the part, your chances were limited.
It was an enforced requirement to fulfill both the athletic and the social role prescribed by the owners.
And this emphasis on the wholesome ideal brings us to a crucial, deeply regrettable aspect of this historical context, one that the league management strictly upheld. The league was informally segregated.
That fact must be front and center in any honest discussion of the AGPBL. Mirroring the practices of the male major leagues at the time, which wouldn't integrate until 1947, the AGPBL maintained an informal but absolute color line.
And our research shows no African-American women were recruited or hired during the league's entire existence.
None, despite the fact that talent was clearly available.
This exclusion is particularly poignant when we consider that there were already black women playing high-level professional baseball.
That's right. We know of 3 women, Toni Stone, Mamie Johnson, and Connie Morgan, who played in the Negro Leagues. Toni Stone, in particular, was the first woman ever to play regularly in the Negro Leagues, playing for the Indianapolis Clowns starting in 1953.
So in the same era as Jackie Robinson.
Precisely. These women proved not only that black women were playing competitively, but that they were doing so alongside and against professional male athletes.
Their presence in the Negro Leagues stands as a testament to their talent and courage. And it just highlights the systematic exclusion the AAGPBL enforced by refusing to give these equally talented women a chance to try out.
It speaks volumes about the societal prejudices of the era and the league management's determination to maintain a specific, white, Midwestern image of wholesomeness.
It's important that modern acknowledgments, like the 2022 television series, attempt to confront this. They featured that fictional black pitcher who was barred from trying out, shining a light on a part of the history the league itself erased.
That effort is a necessary historical correction. And the intensity of the women's professional baseball scene during this decade wasn't limited solely to the AGPBL. The success of Wrigley's initiative immediately prompted the creation of a serious rival league.
One that's often forgotten in the shadow of the AAGPBL. We're talking about the National Girls Baseball League, the NGBL, which was formed just a year later in 1944.
Yes, and it was formed by powerful figures in the Chicago softball scene. Local executives and businessmen like Emory Perici, Charles Bidwell, and Ed Kolsky, who saw the professional potential that Wrigley had unleashed.
The NGBL had a very different geographic model compared to the AGPBL, correct?
It did. The NGBL was composed of 6 teams, but they were all based solely in the Chicago area. This gained a limited geographical reach, but it created an intense local high-density rivalry.
Whereas the AGPBL was spread across the broader Midwest, Rockford, South Bend, Racine.
Right. But despite its local focus, the NGBL was clearly a formidable competitor, which proves the depth of the market for women's baseball. Our records indicate that the NGBL also lasted until 1954, paralleling the entire run of the AGPBL.
And it drew huge crowds.
Impressive local crowds, pulling up to 500,000 fans per season locally, sometimes competing directly with the AGPBL for weekend crowds. That's a serious operation.
500,000 fans for a Chicago-based girls' league. It illustrates that women's professional baseball was a robust, multi-league endeavor, not just AGPBL-centric.
And that the talent pool was deep enough to support two successful ventures. The rivalry was so intense, especially when it came to securing and retaining top athletes, that it led to administrative drama.
The source details a heated, strong rivalry for players, where teams were constantly trying to poach talent from one another.
Which was destabilizing the player market.
So how did the leagues address that talent war?
In 1946, the two organizations had to establish a formal poaching truce, or agreement to stabilize their recruitment pools. This speaks volumes about the seriousness and professionalism of the competition. You don't sign a poaching truce unless you're dealing with genuine professional sports leagues vying for valuable assets.
That truly solidifies the fact that for about a decade, women's professional baseball was thriving in the U.S., and that competitive environment even briefly extended into the traditional baseball offseason.
It did. We see records of the International Girls Baseball League, a brief experiment in the winter of 1952 to 1953. This four-team circuit was based in Miami, Florida, and featured players pulled from both the AGPBL and the NGBL who wanted to play year-round.
Incredible. So let's transition into the nuts and bolts of the AGPBL itself, how it was structured, how the athletes were compensated, and perhaps most interestingly, how the actual game evolved.
Structurally, the AGPBL season was designed to mimic the men's major league season, generally running from late spring to early autumn. This alignment helped maintain a consistent flow of sports entertainment for the public.
And the league employed a fascinating strategy regarding its on-field leadership, right? The deliberate choice to hire prominent male managers, often former major league players.
Exactly. Teams were almost universally managed by men, many of whom were household names in baseball. This included Baseball Hall of Fame inductees like Max Carey, who managed the Milwaukee Chicks, and the legendary slugger Jimmy Fox, who managed the Fort Wayne Daisies.
Why was this necessary? If the women were talented professionals, why did the league feel the need for a male stamp of approval?
The source material is quite clear on the rationale. This was a deliberate choice intended to demonstrate the league's seriousness and legitimacy to the fans. They used established male competitive veterans to position it as a serious, legitimate sporting event rather than a novelty show.
So the implicit message was, if Jimmy Fox is coaching them, this must be real baseball.
That's it. A massive irony, really, that the groundbreaking women's league required male authority figures to legitimize their own professionalism.
And speaking of professionalism, let's talk money. The pay scale certainly underscores that this was a serious enterprise, particularly for women in the 1940s.
The salaries were a key attraction and were decidedly well above the average wages available to women at that time in, traditional fields like secretarial work or wartime factory jobs.
And what were those numbers?
Initially, salaries ranged from $45 to $85 per week.
To really appreciate the economic autonomy this offered these young women, we have to look at those figures in a modern context.
If we use $2024 to convert those original wages, that starting wage of $45 is equivalent to about $818 a week. The top initial wage of $85 translates to approximately $1,545 weekly. These were genuinely competitive, professional wages.
That would have been truly life-changing for many of these young athletes, most of whom came from middle or working-class backgrounds. They were earning enough to support themselves and potentially send money home.
And the compensation structure kept improving for the elite talent. Later in the league's history, top players were earning up to $125 per week.
And that's about $1,500 in today's money.
Roughly, yes. It solidifies that these women were genuine, well-compensated professionals who were making serious money by the standards of the time. This was not a summer job. This was a career.
The league's seriousness was also reflected in the game itself. Let's turn now to the rules, because this is where the league truly distinguished itself, constantly adapting what they were playing year after year.
Forcing the players to evolve their entire skill set.
Right.
The game began as a true hybrid. Since the only organized, competitive form of ball for women at the time was fast-pitch softball, the league officials created a blend, taking elements from fast-pitch softball and combining them with crucial features of traditional baseball.
What were the key baseball similarities that made it feel different from standard softball right from the start?
The differences were strategic and tactical. Crucially, the teams fielded 9 players, which is regulation baseball, not the 10 used in typical softball.
Okay.
And fundamentally, base runner actions critical to baseball strategy, leading off the base, sliding into a bag, and stealing bases, were all permitted from the start.
So that immediately introduces a level of strategy and risk-reward that transforms the game from traditional softball.
Exactly. You had the pace and strategy of baseball overlaid on what initially felt like a slightly more compact, softball-like playing surface. And that foundation was never static. The core mission was to eventually play a version of regulation baseball.
They committed to what our research calls the radical evolution of the rules.
That's the perfect term for it.
The systematic shift of the rules over 12 years, constantly moving closer and closer to regulation baseball, is perhaps the most compelling athletic
dynamic process of upscaling the athletic requirements. If we look at the inaugural 1943 season, the league used a 12-inch ball, the regulation size of a softball.
Okay, a big ball.
The big ball. The base paths were 65 feet, significantly shorter than the 90 feet in regulation baseball. The pitching distance was only 40 feet from the plate, and pitchers were restricted to an underhand motion.
That windmill style.
The windmill style, yes, which would have made for a fast-paced, high-scoring game given the short distances and the large ball. But almost immediately, they began pushing the limits.
This sounds like a laboratory for women's sports, constantly testing what their athletes were capable of.
It was. By 1946, the ball was reduced again to 11 inches, and they started allowing limited sidearm pitching motion alongside the standard underhand, adding more complexity.
But the major athletic transformation seems to have occurred around 1948, marking a turning point for the league's competitive standard.
That's the critical year. In 1948, the ball shrunk significantly again, this time to 10 and 38 inches. More importantly, the pitching distance was pushed back to 50 feet.
And the big one.
The big one. For the first time, overhand pitching was officially allowed.
Switching from underhand to overhand completely changes the required mechanics, the velocity, and the strategy. It means the league was suddenly demanding that its pitchers transform their entire skill set.
It's a massive testament to the athlete's adaptability. The physical demand became exponentially higher. Pitchers had to learn new muscle memory, develop different pitches, and manage the increased stress on their elbows and shoulders. This single rule change completely elevated the caliber of play required.
And the relentless, almost annual move toward regulation baseball continued right up to the very last season.
Right up until the end in 1954. By the final season, the league was using a ball that was 9 inches in circumference, which is the exact size of a regulation baseball.
No way.
The pitching mound had been moved back to 60 feet, which is just inches shy of regulation baseball, 60 feet, 6 inches. And the base paths were extended to 85 feet, just 5 feet short of regulation.
So if you were a player who began in 1943, by 1954, you were essentially playing professional baseball, not softball, under conditions that were nearly identical to the men's game.
A world away from the hybrid game they started with. This 12-year evolution shows an incredible administrative commitment to constantly raising the bar for competition.
However, while the athletic freedom was constantly expanding, the social freedom was simultaneously being strictly constrained. This is the central paradox we mentioned: high pay and intense competition, but constant restrictions on personal expression.
This contrast is the most defining social feature of the AAGPBL era. The league management, spearheaded by Wrigley, was absolutely obsessed with maintaining an image of wholesome, traditional femininity. The women were elite athletes, but they were simultaneously required to act, dress, and present themselves like debutantes in training.
And the league went to extraordinary lengths to enforce this image, starting right away in spring training with the mandatory charm school.
The charm school requirement is legendary. During spring training, the women were required to attend evening classes at Helena Rubinstein's charm school. These were mandatory instructional sessions, not optional seminars.
And they were focused entirely on social training.
Etiquette, stringent personal hygiene standards, acceptable mannerisms, and a very strict dress code. They weren't just learning how to turn a double play, they were learning how to apply makeup and set their hair.
They were even issued a beauty kit.
Yes, from Helena Rubinstein. and given detailed instructions on exactly how to use it. The message being drilled into them was clear. You must be the most skilled athletes in the country, but you must, above all, look distinctly feminine, polished, and non-threatening while performing those athletic feats.
And this rigid image control extended into every aspect of their lives through extremely strict contracts, known as the rules of conduct. Our research indicates these rules were far more restrictive than anything imposed on players in the men's major leagues at the time.
They dictated behavior both on and off the field, creating a truly controlling environment. For example, players were required to wear lipstick at all times.
At all times.
They were strictly forbidden from having short hair, a rule that was enforced with chilling severity.
Let's elaborate on that specific case because it perfectly illustrates the league's priorities.
It's a really sad story. In 1944, a player named Josephine Jojo D'Angelo made the decision to cut her hair short. Likely for practical reasons given the heat and physical demands of the game.
Of course.
And the source confirms that she was actually fired from the league for this violation of the hair length mandate. Her athletic contribution was deemed secondary to her adherence to an arbitrary aesthetic rule.
Fired for a haircut. It's unbelievable. It says everything about where the league management's priorities were.
And this control governed public behavior completely. Smoking or drinking in public places was forbidden. They could not be seen wearing pants, period, unless they were traveling, and even then, discretion was required.
And there were fines for breaking these rules.
A strict fine structure, $5 for the first offense, $10 for the second, escalating to suspension for the third violation.
So the uniform itself was the most visible symbol of this mandate. It was designed by Otis Shepard, who was the art director for both the Chicago Cubs and the overarching Wrigley Company.
And the design needed to scream feminine. It was a one-piece, short-skirted, flared tunic. The aesthetic inspiration explicitly came from figure skating, field hockey, and tennis outfit sports associated with traditional female grace.
The intent was clearly to display a hypofeminine image, contrasting with the dirt and grime of baseball.
That was the core philosophy. All masculine clothing was not allowed, both on the field and in public.
But didn't this impractical, short-skirted design create severe problems when the women were trying to execute high-level professional baseball?
It absolutely did. It created a practical hazard. The original rule stipulated that the skirts were to be worn no more than 6 inches above the knee. However, the women quickly learned that this was simply impossible if they were to execute the game at the necessary professional level. Our research notes that this regulation was most often ignored by the players themselves.
They took matters into their own hands.
They had to. To facilitate necessary athletic movements, running full speed, diving, sliding headfirst into a base, the players routinely raised and secured the hems of their skirts far higher than the rules allowed. It's the perfect encapsulation of the league's paradox. They had to defy the presentation rules simply to succeed at the athletic rules.
That fierce commitment allowed the league to build a huge audience. Let's shift our focus now to how the league built this audience. The early success of its publicity was incredible.
That success was directly attributable to the founder, Philip Wrigley, and his corporate background. He brought that corporate advertising muscle directly to the AAGPBL. The league secured extensive features in major national magazines like Time, Life, 17, and Newsweek. This provided massive national exposure right out of the gate.
And the architect of this national marketing strategy was Arthur E. Meyerhoff.
Meyerhoff was the principal advertising agent, handling the league's publicity from 1943 through 1950. His campaigns were strategically built around themes that resonated deeply with the American public during the war and post-war years.
What were those 4 major themes Meyerhoff focused on?
The first was recreation for war workers, emphasizing the necessary distraction the games offered. The games were framed as a patriotic way to relax.
And the second theme clearly played into the rules we just discussed. Femininity.
Yes, femininity was central. Every marketing piece reinforced the visual image of the players. Beautiful, well-dressed, glamorous, yet surprisingly athletic. They had to constantly reassure the public that these women were still ladies playing baseball.
So the marketing justified the rules of conduct. What about the other 2 themes?
The third was community welfare, which centered the teams in their local towns as civic institutions that promoted local pride. And the fourth theme was simple and crucial, family entertainment, emphasizing that the games were a safe, moral, and affordable outing for the entire family.
These themes, pushed through national publications, attracted both new fans and new prospective players. It was an incredible, successful, centralized professional marketing effort.
The power of a chewing gum mogul's advertising department running a sports league. But that centralized structure, which was the league's initial strength, didn't last forever. The league went through 3 distinct periods of ownership.
Wrigley owned it from 43 to 45.
Then Meyerhoff, the advertising agent, took over from 1945 to 1951, continuing that powerful central marketing push. That's why the league peaked in attendance during his tenure.
And then everything changed in 1951.
The administrative structure changed drastically. From 1951 to the league's end in 1954, the structure shifted to a completely decentralized administration. The individual teams were sold off and became individually owned.
Why did this administrative shift prove so devastating to the league's momentum?
It was fatal to the marketing strategy. With decentralization, the responsibility for all publicity and promotion fell entirely onto individual team management in small Midwestern cities. The source material notes that many local managers simply lacked the expertise, the budget, or the infrastructure that Wrigley's corporate machine had provided.
They lost that massive centralized national advertising power.
They did. Instead of features in Life magazine, they were reduced to relying heavily on local populaces, daily newspaper reports, and local radio broadcasts. The centralized marketing had convinced people across the country to care. The local owners could only convince the people in their hometowns to attend.
That lack of sustained professional publicity accelerated the league's decline right when the post-war shift was already underway. Despite these struggles, the league certainly achieved incredible peak moments before that change.
The absolute height of success, in terms of audience size, was the 1948 season, when those 10 teams collectively brought in 910,000 paid fans.
And certain teams really dominated the competitive landscape during that era. The Rockford Peaches are perhaps the most famous team.
And the most successful. They hold the record, winning 4 league championships in 1945, 1948, 1949, and 1950.
And a true measure of stability. Only 2 teams managed to stay in their home cities for the league's full 12-year run.
Those were the South Bend Blue Sox and the venerable Rockford Peaches. This endurance highlights their successful connection with their local fan bases, even as the larger league structure began to fray around them.
So after the 1948 attendance peak and the decentralization in 51, the league began its slow, terminal decline. What were the specific factors that led to the final shutdown in 1954?
The fundamental reason, unfortunately, goes right back to its original tactical founding context, the end of World War II. Once the war concluded, men returned home in droves, regaining priority in the workforce and, crucially, in the world of sports.
The league's original utility maintaining baseball visibility until the men came back was essentially fulfilled.
Exactly. With the return to normalcy, men's sports regained priority in media attention and public interest. Attendance and revenues began a significant drop in the early 1950s.
And as the league became less financially attractive, players began to leave.
Yes. Some players began opting to return to playing softball or pursuing other careers. Teams began closing down operations rapidly year after year until, at the close of the 1954 season, only 5 teams remained. The remaining administrative body made the difficult but inevitable decision to shut down operations entirely.
And this professional league, after providing thousands of hours of entertainment and launching hundreds of careers, effectively disappeared from the public consciousness for decades.
It was a history largely forgotten. The history only experienced a rebirth much later, thanks entirely to the players themselves.
That rebirth was championed by one of the former players, pitcher June Pepys.
June Pepys is the linchpin in this history's resurrection. In 1980, she initiated a crucial newsletter project with the specific goal of getting back in touch with her former teammates.
And that initial effort blossomed into something much larger.
It did. That newsletter initiative led directly to the league's very first reunion, held in Chicago in 1982. This gathering re-energized the community of former players and paved the way for formal recognition.
And the drive for formal recognition gained real traction from there.
The Players Association was formally established after a 1986 reunion, and their major goal was achieved surprisingly quickly, just 2 years later, with the league's induction into the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown in 1988.
The very induction that was recreated in the 1992 film.
Exactly, and the Players Association continues to thrive today, maintaining that legacy and offering membership not just to surviving players and staff, but also to their descendants.
Which is a wonderful way to pass the history down generationally.
A wonderful example of that is the current president of the AAGPBL Players Association, Richard Chapman, whose connection is through his late mother, Dorothy McGuire, who played in the league.
As we've noted, modern media is playing a significant role in bringing the true complex narrative of the AAGPBL back into the spotlight. The 2022 television series adaptation in particular sought to confront the areas where the 1992 film had fallen short.
The 2022 series was consciously designed to provide a much more nuanced and authentic representation. They were determined to address the historical complexities that were previously downplayed or ignored entirely.
And what key aspects of that historical authenticity did this series address?
Primarily, two major areas concerning social identity and exclusion. First, the series addressed the reality of homosexuality and queer identities within the league.
This is an important piece of the historical record that is now being openly discussed by the players themselves.
Exactly. Former pitcher Maybelle Blair, for instance, who served as an advisor to the 2022 series, has openly discussed her own identity and the large presence of queer women in the league. She noted that they had to live in constant fear of discovery.
And the second major correction addressed the league's segregation policies.
Yes. The series shone a light on race relations by introducing that fictional black pitcher who was barred from trying out. This consciously confronted the league's systematic exclusion while also paying necessary homage to the three black women, Toni Stone, Mamie Johnson, and Connie Morgan, who played professionally in the Negro Leagues.
This modern reckoning ensures that the league's legacy is viewed not just as a triumphant story, but as a complex institution that reflected the prejudices and struggles of its time.
Absolutely. And beyond media recognition, the Players Association is also ensuring the league's legacy endures in an active, athletic sense through the establishment of American Girls Baseball in 2019.
What exactly is the mission of American Girls Baseball today?
Its primary function is to actively promote women's baseball, specifically supporting the growth and competitive opportunities related to the Women's Baseball World Cup.
And as a tribute, they've established a new tournament featuring teams named after the originals.
Yes, the All-American Women's Baseball Classic Tournament, which began in 2022. It features 4 teams named as tributes to the original AAGPBL squads: Rockford, South Bend, Racine, and Kenosha.
And are these modern teams playing under the old hybrid rules?
No, they play under modern WBSC women's baseball rules, which are essentially regulation baseball rules. The games last 7 innings, and the players must be at least 16 years old to participate. It keeps the history alive while embracing the full, modern evolution of the sport that the AAGPBL pioneered.
And for anyone who wants to connect with this incredibly rich living history, the annual reunions continue.
They do. The 2025 reunion is scheduled for Durham, North Carolina, and the American Women's Baseball Classic will be held as part of the reunion events, creating a powerful, direct link between the pioneers and the current generation. So what does this all mean? If we consider the entire trajectory of the AAGPBL, it represents a profound defining paradox for women's athletic opportunities in the mid-20th century.
It was a truly groundbreaking opportunity that provided high salaries and intense competition, forcing a radical athletic evolution of the game over 12 years.
Yet it simultaneously enforced incredibly rigid, restrictive, and often impractical standards of femininity and behavior through charm school mandates and strict rules of conduct. These women were professional athletes who were also compelled to be walking advertisements for a specific, narrow vision of American womanhood.
This history reminds us that even when women broke through the barriers of professional athletics, that success often came with a heavy, non-negotiable cost of personal autonomy and self-expression.
The ability of the AAGPBL players to not only navigate, but thrive within that high-pressure, highly contradictory environment is perhaps the most enduring testament to their pioneering spirit.
The AAGPBL's intense motto was "Do or Die." Considering the intensity that slogan implies and the dramatic evolution of their game, we're left with a challenging thought for you to consider. How might the trajectory of women's professional sports in the United States today be fundamentally different if Philip K. Wrigley's centralized, well-funded corporate advertising influence had been sustained past 1950? If the league hadn't collapsed, would we have seen women's professional baseball reach the next level before Title IX? It's interesting to think about the national momentum that might have been sustained. Thanks for listening.